And welcome to this edition of Baseball Essential. My name is Gershon Rabinowitz. I am joined by a very special guest, has appeared on Major League Baseball on Fox for a number of years, probably best known as the voice now in MLB The Show. He's worked for the Red Sox, worked for the Dodgers, a former Major League infielder, Steve Lyons, also known as Psycho. It's an honor to have you on the show.
Gershon, thank you very much. This is, I've been following your guys' site on Twitter. I really like it. I love the information that I get from you guys. Working in Boston now, but living in Los Angeles, it's kind of hard to keep up on what's going on. So you guys have been a great help for me.
Thanks. That's what we try to do, burning the midnight oil, trying to do this 24/7, trying to get baseball coverage out there to all people in the baseball community. You attended Oregon State. You're from Tacoma, Washington originally, and you're from the Pacific Northwest. When did you begin to realize a big league career would be a possibility for you?
Never. Really, it's kind of funny because, when you do, things have changed now with the Oregon State baseball program, which has been a very prominent program over the last 10 years. They won the national title in 06 and 07. That was never anything that we were able to accomplish when I was a kid growing up in Oregon, because it rains so much up there in the Pacific Northwest, Oregon, Washington, Montana. Those states just aren't conducive to playing a lot of baseball, so that when scouts would come around, they used to think that we didn't play very good baseball just because of that. I know that Pat Riley, who's head coach Pat Casey, I'm sorry, Riley just left Oregon State and went to Nebraska. Pat Casey, who's the head coach for baseball at Oregon State, really changed the culture and won championships with mostly Oregon kids, and now he can recruit from anywhere in the country. People will come there to play because they know it's a good program. When you grow up in the atmosphere of people telling you that you're no good, you really have to be kind of a fighter. So I never really believed that I'd ever make it to the major leagues until I got to AAA baseball. And then I realized, wow, I'm really only one step away. If something happens, I might get a chance to have a career in the big leagues. And eventually that did happen for me.
And it was a pretty interesting career. I mean, you were actually a first-round draft pick. Some people don't realize it because you were a utility man. You played about a decade in the big leagues. And you were also traded for Tom Seaver, which was pretty interesting. I was reading that. And you played 9 positions, I think, in an exhibition game. So a lot of interesting things there. And what impact did being versatile, playing 9 positions and being able to stick around that long have on you lasting in the big leagues?
Well, that is the key right there. That is longevity for you. If you have the ability to play more than one position. When I go to talk to kids now, if I'm speaking at a high school or a junior high or a little league program, one of the things I stress, not more than anything, the thing I stress more than anything is to play with your heart. You have to hustle, you have to have desire, you have to kind of really want it. If you don't, then you should find something else to do. You should find what your passion is and go after that. It doesn't have to be baseball. It is for a lot of people. I loved it. That was my passion. But if it's not yours, find something else to do. And the second most important thing I talk about is the ability to be able to move around, because I might call myself a second baseman. Hey, I'm the best second baseman on this team, and I'm going to be a second baseman in the major leagues someday. But I can guarantee you, no matter how good you are going to bump into somebody in your lifetime who's better than you at playing second base. And if you haven't figured out how to play a different position, left field or DH or somewhere else, or you can go over and play third, or maybe you can play first. If you haven't experimented with those positions in your downtime, then you're going to find yourself sitting on the bench. If you're just a second baseman, you will find some kid eventually that's better than you. And if you can't play anywhere else, you'll be sitting on the bench. So I really encourage kids to play a bunch of different positions, because it can keep you in the big leagues like it did for me.
Yeah, it has for many people. John McDonald, Willie Bloomquist, guys that could play multiple positions. Brock Holt in Boston has been able to prove that recently. If you're able to play multiple positions, you probably have a longer big league career, especially these days when there aren't that many versatile players. It's a lot of players that are one-dimensional type guys, and their careers aren't nearly as long.
Yeah, and these days there's a big difference, too, because usually you are a utility outfielder or a utility infielder, and you're not both. I was both, so that made me a little bit more valuable during the time that I played, because a team could literally look at me and say, well, He can play left field if we need him. He can also play second base. You know, the only place that I really couldn't play on an everyday basis was shortstop because I was too big. You know, I'm 6'3", 220. That's kind of a big shortstop. There are a few guys that did it, Ripken and A-Rod. But generally, if you have a utility player and he's going to end up being your shortstop for 2 weeks because your regular shortstop broke his finger, you want a speedy little smaller defensive shortstop to take over. You don't want Steve Lyons at 6'3", 220 taking over because in that 2-week period, I may cost you a game with my defense, and that's not what you're looking for.
Perhaps your most memorable big league moment or infamous big league moment was 1990 July. I think you know where I'm going with this. At Tiger Stadium, when you accidentally pulled down your pants on the field of play, you completely forgot where you were. Take us through that moment and what was going through your mind.
But people, when everybody asks me about that now, I always say that I needed a date, and that's just kind of my sense of humor. But I really just brain cramped. You know, when you're a player like me, I was a career 260 hitter. It wasn't like I got a lot of hits all the time, and it was really important for me to get a hit. And so I tried to bunt my way on, and I dove into first base trying to beat the play. And I believed that I was out, but they called me safe. And I think the pitcher was Dan Petrie. The first baseman was Cecil Fielder. And they argued with the umpire, Dan Evans, I think was the first base umpire, and they were arguing that they got me, that I was out. And while they were arguing, I literally forgot I was still standing on the field, and I could feel all the dirt running down on the inside of my pants, and I was like, I got to get this out. And so I just kind of pulled my pants down to get the dirt out before I realized that I was still standing on first base. So it was a colossal brain cramp, but you know, if I never did that, it was, like as you mentioned, it's probably the most famous thing that I ever did in my playing career. So people remember me for it, and that's okay with me.
You're lucky that there wasn't social media around then, like Facebook or Twitter or something like that was going on during your playing days. I was also thinking MLB The Show, that there would be actually a good way to reference it without being so explicit about it, that you could probably say something like, on the field, you have to be aware of your surroundings. Take it from me. There was one time where I completely forgot where I was, and to this day, I still can't live it down. I was thinking that would be like a great line for MLB The Show, going in their style based on that, and then people, you know, find out that clip and find out exactly what went on then.
Yeah, you know, you could look at it the other way. If there was social media, I might be a huge star if everybody saw what was going on that night. But, you know, yeah, you mentioned MLB The Show on Sony, and that's been so much fun for me to do. I had done a video game for about 3 or 4 seasons, probably 10 years ago now, and that baseball video game company went out of business. So I was like, oh, man, that was a lot of fun, and it's great to have your voice on a game that kids can relate to and that they play. And I don't pull any punches on that game. If you take a bad swing, I'm going to tell you, you look like crap on that swing. If you can't get the ball over the plate, I'm going to be like, man, go home and get things squared away. Come back tomorrow, see if you can get somebody out. So I have fun with that. It's extremely tedious work, but it's a lot of fun knowing that, you know, almost everything you say has the potential to come out on the game, and there's like literally, you know, millions of kids that could be listening to what you're saying on that game at that time.
Well, it happens when there's like a lot of repetitiveness. Sometimes when you play so much, and that game is so engrossing, so addicting at times, that when you play it for so many years and you hear the same lines that Matt Vasgersian would say, it gets stuck in your head, even some of the lines that you've had in that game. What goes into recording some of those dialogue and the lines, and do you ever improvise from the script that you're given?
I improvise all the time, and that's probably a problem more so for me than it is for them, because I'm giving them an opportunity to see something differently. They'll give me a line, or in a lot of cases, it's not such a line, it's more of a paragraph that you have to say, and I'll change it and switch it and change words that I don't like, that don't sound like me, and then I'll mess it up, so I'll have to start over, and I'll do it the way they want it, and then I'll do it 2 other ways that I like it, and then I'll do it another way that might be a different thing. And I could have gotten through that line in in 10 seconds, but now I've spent 3 minutes on it, and that just makes the recording session longer and longer and longer for me, but I feel like I'm giving them better opportunities to show more. Like you said, you don't want it to get too repetitive, but at the same time, when they have a line that they like, wow, that's a bad pitch, low and outside, that's a ball. Well, you might hear that come back in next year's game and the year after that game because it's kind of a common thing to say. And from my perspective, I don't want to have to say it every year. I know that I'm going to go back down next week and do another recording session with them. We're not done with the game for this season yet, but my workload has lessened year after year because the first year was the biggest year for me. I had to say everything. And then since that time, they do have things that I've said that they can use again, so I don't have to say them again.
Do you record the audio with Vasgersian and Keros in there, or everybody does that separately?
You know, this is a bad trade secret, maybe. We have generally 1 or 2 sessions when we're not, like the last time I worked with Matt, I wasn't even together. He was in New York, I was in San Diego, but we were together on the session. We didn't see each other, but we could hear each other, and we were doing it together. And I've done one of those with Eric as well, but generally we do it by ourselves, and they set it up by like, what you're saying now has come off of something that Eric just said, so you're responding to that. So keep that in mind when you say this line.
How many hours would you put into something like that, I'm wondering? When you're trying to record that, a week process, a 2-week process, or is that something where you're just sitting one day for 15, 20 hours just recording every single possible line or scenario that could happen in the game?
Yeah, it's 40 hours, but it's usually 5 hours at a time, 5 or 6 hours at a time, because think about it. I mean, that's a long time just to sit there and talk. And my voice isn't as strong as maybe it should be, and I've had times in there where they've looked at me and said, all right, your voice is gone, so we got to be done for today. And, you know, I live up in Los Angeles. They record down in San Diego, and we go back and forth, a bunch of different trips during the season and after the season's over is where they can get the best recording sessions because all the information is current and won't change. You know, it's hard to do a session in June when you don't know what's happened for the rest of that season. As soon as the season's over, all the information is there. You know what's going on. It's easy to say, hey, Pablo Sandoval up here now, and, you know, what a great World Series he had again. You know, I can't say that in June.
No, I mean, also in June, you guys are all working your jobs. You're all broadcasting. You're all doing different things. And the last question I have on the show itself, is it an accurate representation of the game of baseball, and can it be used as a teaching tool?
The game itself?
Yeah.
I don't know, because, you know, it's all up to the user. So, you know, you swing at bad pitches, I can't help you. You know, I can only do so much from sitting in a sound booth while you're screwing up the game. Now, if you go out there and play well, I'll say good things about you, but I'll tell you, you know, it's really hard if you don't know what you're doing there. You gotta be able to punch the right button.
And at the end of your playing career, you became a broadcaster, as I referenced. How much prep goes into retirement when you're at the end of your playing career? How much do you think about that?
A lot, I think, for certain guys. I mean, I think there's some guys these days that don't have to think that much about it because, you know, you have a couple good seasons and you sign one nice contract. I would hope that you'd never have to work again. I mean, if you're making, you know, if you sign one deal for a few $1 million, you should be able to live for the rest of your life without having to worry about that. I made $2 million in my entire career, 13 years playing both in the minor leagues and the big leagues. So I needed a job, you know. If I had a 6-year deal for $10 million a year, that's $60 million. I would hope I'd never have to work again. So I definitely need to think about what I wanted to do after I was done. I wasn't that great of a major league player. I was a very average player. And so the broadcasting thing was something that I really wanted to do. I was afraid that I wouldn't get the opportunity because I wasn't a household name as a player. But I tend to think that guys that aren't really good players can be better broadcasters because we've had to think about more things than a guy that falls out of bed and hits 300. You know, I've had to put myself in positions where I wasn't playing that day, and I kind of had to manage the game and those kind of situations. So I had to certainly look at a broadcast career as my career, not as something that I wanted to dabble in after I was done playing.
And also at the end of your playing career, when you think about it, the money was a lot different in baseball. There was a lot of issues as far as dividing the money between players and the owners. Some of them were disillusioned about collusion. That was in the late 80s with free agency, and then it led to the strike. And then the TV contract with CBS also messed things up a little bit financially for the game. So the game was a little bit out of whack, and the money wasn't the same. So when you're mentioning that you made $2 million in your career, obviously it's a lot different, especially when you put it into standards of 2014. And in 1996, Fox started their Major League Baseball coverage. They got the TV contract at that time. How did you get the job at Fox Sports? And can you go through how they developed the baseball package and what was going on around that time at Fox?
Well, Fox, you know, especially when they go in initially on a new project for them, they don't cut many corners. They go in big, and I think as time goes on, they generally try to pull back a little bit. But they were going in big to get baseball in '96, and what was, gosh, I can't remember. What was that? I can't remember what was the baseball package before there. John Filippelli was on it. He now works
the Baseball Network.
The Baseball Network, and I wanted an audition with them to work with them, and I didn't get one. And then Filippelli came to Fox, and I found a way to talk someone in to let me go in and audition. And long story short, I had a pretty good audition, and Filippelli came in and told me that I messed his day up because he knew who were going to get the jobs, and I wasn't one of them. And I messed his day up because I was really good, and now he's got to think about it. And so as time went on, I talked him into giving me the pre- and post-game show rather than a game broadcaster, although that's what I really wanted to be, is a game broadcaster rather than pre- and post. But I felt initially at Fox I wasn't going to be one of the main analysts, and they were going to do 4 games every Saturday. Mm-hmm. So I'd be on the game that went to 6% of the country. But if I was on the pregame show and the postgame show, I was going to go to 100% of the country every Saturday before the game started. So my thought process was that gives me a chance to establish myself as someone who has an opinion, someone who has an intelligent opinion and isn't afraid to say what he thinks. And that worked out really well for me. You know, I won 3 national Emmys during my time on the pregame show, and then evolved into a game broadcaster, and did that for 7 seasons too. So it was a really good opportunity for me, and I felt like I took full advantage of it.
And to clarify things, what I mentioned about before with the Baseball Network, that was a package between NBC and ABC. It wasn't MLB Network or anything like that. It was an experiment by Major League Baseball to televise games like NFL football, where everything was in regional coverage, including the postseason. And there were many announcers around the country, especially local announcers, doing games. And the package lasted for about 2 years. There were complications with the strike, and it led to Major League rights being opened again, and then for Fox. And Steve, I mean, you were doing some studio work, I think, with Chip Carey and then with Keith Olbermann. Then you went to the booth in 2001, and you were working with Tom Brenneman. And one thing about the Fox package, it really coincided with the Yankee dynasty in the Joe Torre era, around the time Derek Jeter became the captain of the Yankees in 2003, and then, you know, was a shortstop, won 4 championships with the Bombers. You guys had the call, you and Brenneman, of the flip game. Could you describe what was it like to cover those Yankee teams in general, and then also that flip game and that play? Take us through that a little bit.
Come on, you know I work for the Red Sox. You think I'm supposed to say good things about the Yankees now? You're sounding like a Yankees fan to me. You're killing me right now. But I'll tell you, that was a great game to be a part of for a lot of reasons. And I may get my games messed up here, but I don't think I'm messed up, because that was Game 5 against Oakland, correct?
That's actually Game 3, the flip game.
Oh, Game 3 was the flip game. All right. Well, because that was, I had said that I couldn't believe he was able to make the play because there's no reason for him to be where he was. there are double cutoffs on a ball down the right field line, but the shortstop isn't one of the guys that's involved in that. So the amazing part of that play for me wasn't the flip, because he looked like an option quarterback from Michigan making that flip play to get the out at home. But the amazing part to me was that he was there in the first place. There's no way a shortstop comes all the way across the diamond up on the first baseline to be involved in a play like that. So it was a special play, but for me, the most special thing about it was where he was, because he wasn't supposed to be there.
Well, also I noticed when I was looking back at that clip a little bit earlier, I noticed that you and Tom were talking about how the A's don't steal bases, they don't bunt, they don't do any of the little things, and later on we learned that was because of Moneyball. So you had Jeremy Giambi running a slow runner. If you did have the hit and run, and you mentioned about that they don't hit and run right before that pitch, and Giambi was out by a fraction on that play. So that was something that stuck with me. And also, I was looking back at some of these old clips with the Yankees from around that era, because they won 4 championships during that time. On the pregame show, many of those times, I remember that you picked Atlanta in 96, you picked the Padres in 98, you picked the Mets in 2000. I remember that you took a lot of heat for that stuff. And I think
I hated the Yankees.
Yeah,
I hated them.
I think one time Chip Carey actually introduced you. I remember one game where he was like, "Hello, everybody. I'm Chip Carey along with Steve, public enemy number 1 Lyons." Right? I think I was at Yankee Stadium. He said that one time, just because that kept happening. It was just weird.
Okay, now you're pointing out all my bad points. I had some great years. I'll tell you what. I had my best year was when the Yankees played the Arizona Diamondbacks, and before that series started, I said that the Diamondbacks would win in 7 games, and that Mariano Rivera would blow 1 game that would mean the difference. And of course, it ended up being Game 7 there. So I was right on that one. And it's important to me to be right when I'm predicting things. I think it's important as an analyst to predict what you think is going to happen. That's what your job is. You don't have to be right all the time. I like to be right, but when I predict things, I like to give the fans and the viewers another way to look at what they're looking at. They may disagree with me, but at least I'm showing them, here's what I think over here. You may think this, but step away from your thought process right now and look at what I'm seeing over here and see if this might be a possibility. And I think that's kind of the thing. You need conflict. You need conflict even in your own opinions. Oh, man, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this guy does know what he's talking about.
A lot of times your opinions, I remember, were also those types of opinions were actually not like the Yankees winning a lot of those championships. They weren't the prevailing opinion. The Atlanta Braves in 96, that team was expected to be the team in the 90s with the dynasty that they had, or what was emerging. They're really expecting them to break out that year. So it was
and I believe upset, that was also wasn't that also the year where the Yankees had clinched early, and so it was like, and then they had the rain, so it was like 7 days before they played a game. So I think the reason why I called Atlanta in 6, and oh, by the way, I believe I was working with Dave Winfield at the time.
Yep.
He also called Atlanta in 6.
Yeah.
And so he was public enemy number 1, especially in New York. Not me.
Yeah.
Stayed there. But I was worried, and I think I said this. I said it will be Game 3 before the Yankees actually wake up and understand that they're in the playoffs, because they haven't played for so long. And that's pretty much what happened. The Leyritz home run, that turned everything around. But, I mean, they did not look like the New York Yankees for the first couple of games of that series because they had that long layoff. I thought that would doom them.
In 2000, I think you picked the Mets that year. That year, really, the Mets, they were a wild card team. They really got hot at the right time. And it looked like they were going to make a run against the Yankee team that was kind of fading around that time. People forget about that. And then the Yankees kind of flipped the switch in the postseason and then really made their mark. And you also, as I think, said in the past that you were Vin Scully's last partner. What exactly did you mean by that? And what did you learn from being around Vin Scully with the Dodgers when you were working there as a local broadcaster?
Well, it's hard to learn a lot from Vin because he is a special broadcaster and does things his own way. And I really feel that if you're going to be a broadcaster yourself, if you're going to try to pattern yourself after Vin Scully, you're going to lose because you can't do it as well as he does, and you just can't be him. So you got to try to be yourself. And of course, Vin worked by himself, and so we never worked together. So if he was doing a game, I wasn't, and if I was doing a game, he wasn't. But I did work with Vin in the movie For Love of the Game. And that was really the last time anybody ever worked with Vin Scully. And that's my joke, that I always say I'm the last guy to ever work with him. because in that movie we worked together, and it was a great experience and a lot of fun. And being around Vince Scully is as special as it gets if you are a broadcaster, and especially for the 10 years that I worked for the Dodgers. He's the man here. So it just kind of soaking up the love that the people here in Los Angeles have for him it's abnormal, to tell you the truth. I mean, when you think about it, the Dodger franchise is one of the most storied, not only in baseball, but in all of sports, going back to Brooklyn and everything. And the most popular Dodger of all time is a guy who never put a uniform on. Vince Scully never played one game ever for the Dodgers, but he is easily the most popular Dodger of all time. Now, that's weird to me, but it's absolutely the truth. So there's no getting around that.
Is there any difference calling a game locally or nationally, and how do you prepare for a game broadcast?
I loved doing the national games. That's how I broke into doing broadcasts for the most part. I had done some local games, but it's now that I'm not doing it, it's not the way to do it. I would do a game for Fox in August, and it would be a Houston Miami Marlin game. And I hadn't seen either team play the entire year. We'd get in the night before. I'd go out to the ballpark, and I'd do as much studying as I could. I'd talk to all the coaches. I'd talk to as many of the players. The next day, I'd do the same thing on the field. They'd give you a ton of information like they do. And then I'd stand up there in the booth and lie about people for 3 hours because I hadn't seen these guys play. If you're doing local games, you see the team every day. The team you study the most is the opposing team that you're going to play for the next 3 days. I know the Dodgers. I know the Red Sox. I need to know the team that they're playing, and that's where you do all your studying, and that's where you spend most of your time talking to players. I would rather talk to a player than read a stat sheet because that guy's going to tell me what's going on. That's my best homework is during batting practice and for the 3 hours before the game starts. But when you're doing a national game, you don't know the team as well as the everyday broadcasters. You don't know the team as well as their fans know the team. So it's an awkward situation to be in. And you do the best you can, if you're smart, to try to get as much information as you can. And I'll tell you what, when I was doing the national games, I ran straight to the local broadcasters and said, help me. What do you got for me? What happened 2 weeks ago that I should know about? Was there a fight in the clubhouse that really didn't get publicized? But, what's going on between these two guys? There's a bunch of information that you'll never know as a national guy, and because you can't. That the local guys do know, and they're your best source of information in that situation.
Last season, you joined the Nesson Red Sox broadcast crew. Compared to the championship season they had in 2013, what really changed last year? They only won 71 games, and they were in last place in the American League East. Was there a hangover from that World Series championship?
I think almost every year there is. I mean, the last back-to-back champions were your Yankees. Was it 2000, 2001 or whatever? It's been a long time since you can go back-to-back. It's a really hard thing to do. And that team did change up the middle where you're supposed to be the strongest. They lost Stephen Drew, and they got him back, and it was kind of a mistake, I think, that they got him back because he wasn't the same guy. And they lost Ellsbury, who's another, great defensive player and had a great offensive season for him. But all due respect, the Red Sox team that played in 2012, or the championship team, was the team that played this last season. That was who they were supposed to be. Everything went right for the Red Sox when they won the championship. They, if there was a close play, the Red Sox were safe. If there was a extra inning win, it was the Red Sox that did it. They had no problems. They had no injuries. Anything that could go well for them went well for them. And then, all due respect to the tragedy that was the bombing at the Marathon, that unified a city. It unified the team. It was a city that wrapped around the Red Sox. There was the amount of love in that town, and I'm a true believer in that type of chemistry. that pushed that team over the top. They weren't a very good team. And then last season, they showed exactly the team that they were supposed to be. There's no one picked the Red Sox to win in that season. And now this last season, they kind of showed the team that they really were, and they were terrible. You know, at the end of the day, they just weren't a very good team at all.
Lots of changes. During the season, they traded away Peavy. They traded away John Lackey. John Lester was traded. They've made a lot of different moves. It's a completely different pitching rotation right now. They added Yoenis Cespedes, who is probably going to be a trade target. They have 8 outfielders now on the roster after they signed Hanley Ramirez, who they're going to move to the outfield. They signed Pablo Sandoval. So with those 8 outfielders, what is the likelihood that Boston moves an outfielder such as Cespedes or Alan Craig, who they just brought in the trade deadline, for an arm in the starting rotation?
Oh, there's no question a couple of those guys are leaving, and hopefully they can get somebody good for them. They need frontline pitching, clearly. I know they're going back after Lester. I know that Cole Hamels is on their radar. I think Chris Sale's another guy that they'd love to have. And the Red Sox are in a unique situation right now. They have money to spend, a lot of it, and they also have some pretty darn good prospects that they can package together in a deal to bring some frontline pitching. But you're right. I mean, there's a gluttony of outfielders out there, and a few of them have got to go. And you have to understand, I think, right now that any team that wants to deal with the Red Sox right now is probably asking for Mookie Betts, and I think that they would probably like to hang on to him, but he may be the kingpin in a trade that brings them a number 1 or number 2, because they don't have either of those. They don't have a number 1 or a number 2 starter, and, you know, they're trying hard to get Lester back, but from what I understand right now as we speak, you know, the Dodgers have entered that fray, and the Dodgers have loads of money, and I, for one, believe that John Lester would love pitching in L.A. He doesn't know it right now. I mean, he has made comments about wanting to come back and playing for the Red Sox, the one organization that he knows better than any other organization, obviously. But I can tell you that if he had the opportunity to play in L.A., certainly for the amount of money that they're going to pay him to play in L.A., he'd love it.
In what ways has the game changed since you retired?
I think, you know, money's always a big change in the game as we move forward. The TV packages, you know, I think the Dodger package is for $8 billion, and that's their local package over 20 years. That's a lot of money you can spend on players. So I think that you can make a $25 million mistake every season as an organization. Oh, we're going to sign this guy and we're going to overpay for him, but we think he's going to be good, and then that guy turns out to be not very good. You're like, no big deal. We'll get another guy next year. We'll pay him $25 million. So you almost can't even talk about worth with players and correlate it to money, because it doesn't matter anymore. You got to really figure out what your needs are as far as what your team is and what you need, and go get those guys, and however much money it takes, then you do it because you have it. So I think that's the big thing. The game itself, I think, is starting to go back to more of a speed and defense game after the whole PED issue. You know, and let's look at it this way. Who the Red Sox just signed? Sandoval and Hanley Ramirez. Pablo Sandoval has never hit 25 home runs and never driven in 90, and he's going to make nearly $20 million a year. You know, I mean, after the PED situation, you're going to see fewer home runs, and the power numbers are going to go down, so you're going to pay a premium for a guy who can hit 20 home runs doing it naturally. So the natural trend, as far as I'm concerned, is going to go back to playing better defense and get yourself some speed guys to steal some bases and play better D.
Especially at the premium positions, catcher, shortstop, center field, anything up the middle, you're going to see guys making a lot of money. I was looking at the Blue Jay contract with Russell Martin. He's going to be making $20 million in his mid to late 30s. And if you talk about the way that the game has changed financially, that's pretty remarkable right there. And you mentioned, I think one time, about you're the type of person that always believes an umpire's call is final. What are your thoughts about expanded instant replay in baseball?
I don't like instant replay. I never have. I think when I was 11 years old, I came home from a game and I told my dad that the umpires beat us. And he looked me in the eye and said, "What happened?" I said, "Well, the umpires are terrible. They beat us today." He looked at me and said, "An umpire will never, ever beat you. If you think that an umpire can beat you, then you're a loser."
And he said, how many hits did you get today? And I said, I was 2 for 4. And he said, how about your buddy over there, John? How many hits did he have? I said, well, he was 2 for 4 too. And he said, well, there's 4 at-bats between you guys where you didn't get any hits. And there's a bunch of other guys on your team that didn't do anything when they could have. Had you scored 10 more runs, there was nothing that an umpire could have ever done to make you lose a game. So basically what he's saying is, like, certainly there are some umpire calls that might not help you or that may not go in your favor. But there's tons of things that you can do in a 9-inning game to overcome that kind of stuff. And if you want to blame the umpires, then you're just a loser. Look yourself in the mirror when you lose a game and say it was our fault, nobody else's. And I think that was a great lesson for me. And I happen to be one of those people that think that the umpires are the greatest in the world at what they do. I think that the replay system this year made them a little more lax. I think that they now understand that if they happen to miss a call, that it's going to be reviewed and it will get turned over, and it's like, well, okay, no big deal. I just think they're so good at what they do. They miss very few of them, although the people that are listening to this right now will point to the replay system and say, well, they did miss a lot of calls, and I think they have missed more calls since the replay system has come in. I also think that baseball fans are willing to live with some of those mistakes. I like to say that baseball is a perfectly imperfect game. We know there's going to be some mistakes. We'll live with it. We'll move on. It's part of the game. Just like baseball's sort of like life that way. Life isn't fair either. You deal with it. And I think that's what has always made baseball such a great game, is that I'll deal with the inaccuracies of the game. I'll deal with the injustice against me during a baseball game. It'll make me a better person on the way out.
And baseball is also just a game of failure. If you succeed 3 out of 10 times, you're a 300 hitter. You're one of the most successful players in baseball. What hobbies do you have outside the game of baseball?
Well, I have 3 kids and a grandson, so that cuts down on some of the hobbies. Obviously, they take up a lot of my time, and that's fine with me. Love to play golf. So that takes up a lot of time. And, when you're during season, is certainly the period of time where you don't get to spend as much time with your family. So the off season, I spend more of my time trying to reintroduce myself to my kids and spend more time with them. And, it seems like the things that I might have done if I didn't have kids have become less important. So other than getting out to play a little bit of golf, that's about where it ends. I try to get to the gym and burn off the calories that I ate the night before, and if I can do that, I'm happy.
And we were really happy to have you on tonight, Seiko. I mean, it was great to have you on. If you ever want to come on again, it's our pleasure.
Well, I certainly appreciate the time.
Thanks for joining us. And you can follow Steve Lyons on Twitter at SteveLyons12. You can watch him on Nesson calling some Red Sox games and doing some studio work for them. You can follow us at baseballessential.com. BB_essential is our Twitter handle. You can find us there. We merged recently with a site called On Base Talk. We're part of Yardbarker, part of Fox Sports is an affiliate through Yardbarker. So a lot of great stuff. Our network's expanding. We got a lot of interviews, a lot of great stuff in the off season. We're just getting started. And Steve, thanks for joining us.
No problem. You guys do a great job. I appreciate what you do.
Thanks. We'll talk soon.